Alright, guys, I have a few movies that I want to be reviewing because great thing about living in Baltimore is that you're right next to Bengies Drive-In Movie Theater. And a little while ago, Benji's had a wonderful lineup. It was five movies. It was a dusk-till-dawn showing. And it was ParaNorman, The Odd Life of Timothy Green, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, which I won't be going into, but that was a great treat. The Bourne Legacy and the Expendables too. I'm just going to go through each of them briefly, um, and I'll start with what was the best movie of the night, which was also the first movie, ParaNorman. I had heard a lot of good things about this movie going into it, and the animation looked fun, and the characters looked pretty stock for me, at least from the trailers. I'm like, all right, well let's see how this goes, and we ended up getting in, and we watched the film, and I gotta say it was a really great movie. Out of all the movies that played there that night, excluding Vertigo, because that's my favorite Hitchcock film, uh, it really was. It really was the best movie that played that night. Uh, the characters were memorable. They stick in your head. They're making fun of stereotypes in horror films, and so you can definitely see the satire. Uh, but at the same time, the the story arcs and whatnot, like it did something that is rarely consistent in kids' films. One of the things that it was interesting about this movie, and spoiler alert for people, but one of the interesting things about this movie is that there really isn't a villain. You find out all the information about the supposed villains and whatnot, the supposed bad guys in the movie, but then you learn more as the movie goes along. So actually, everything shifts. The dynamic was very, very uh, unbalanced all the time. Like it kept me entertained. It kept me interested. But at the same time, the animation is fantastic. And I'm much more of a fan of 2D animation than 3D animation, with an exception of a handful of movies like Pixar and stuff like that, or at least the majority of Pixar. But this one actually does a really good job, and it utilizes the animation style very well. Um, so that one definitely is the best one of the night, and also it was funny. It was very funny, and even for me, because also there's tons of references in there to movies or stories of the same type. Uh, and if you're older, you'll get it. If you're younger, it's still funny. Moving on to the next one down, the next best movie of the night for me was The Bourne Legacy, and it's weird to say that because the thing is, ParaNorman was actually better than all the rest of the movies there. The Bourne Legacy, I thought it was well shot. Uh, it was well paced in a way, but at the same, and also the acting was good. Like the actors held their own. But the thing is, it doesn't feel like a complete movie. The great thing about the Bourne identity is that even though it leaves up for the next two, the next two movies and whatnot, and you learn about all the information as it goes, by itself, it perfectly stands as a standalone movie. This movie, you have had to have read the books or watched the first three movies in order to get a lot of the references in here. This is not a movie that you can just come into. Now, a lot of people are saying, like, this is a new story arc within the universe and all that kind of stuff. Well, if it's a new story arc, then you need to reestablish some other form of stasis. It needs to have a, a good base to jump the movie off. You literally have had to have come from the Bourne Ultimatum into the Bourne Legacy in order to get half the things they were talking about, or bringing up some of the characters that were in the previous films. Now, of course, they have Matt Damon in the movie a few times, but the main focus is Jeremy Renner. And Jeremy Renner does a good job for what the character is written. Jeremy Renner is a really good actor. But at the same time, it it doesn't feel nearly as sharp, as intelligent as the first movie. It seems a lot more like an action film with some espionage thrown into it. Uh, and like, it really it was something that was getting a little far-fetched when it came down to certain elements of the film. It was interesting. It was entertaining. It definitely kept my attention, and I can't really fault it for that. Besides the fact that it doesn't really it's an incomplete film, and you can obviously tell that they're setting up the end of this movie to go on with more films. See, with The Bourne Identity, you didn't know. It was at a point where it could stop or it could keep going. And actually all of the Bourne movies were like that, except for this one. This one feels that either... because, like, the last act of the movie, which is about 20 or so minutes, 15 minutes of that is just one giant chase scene. It's just one giant chase scene, which was, I guess you can say, like, they were going for the type of chase scene that was in the Bourne Identity when he was driving the mini car through the streets of Paris and whatnot. And at parts that it was kind of like that, but at the same time, it just didn't work as a conclusion. And it was a bit of a cop-out in a way, I think. It didn't match up to anything in the original of the same surgical precision that the Bourne Identity had. Okay, next one down after that, you might find interesting. It's actually The Expendables 2. Now let me make something perfectly clear. I hate Sylvester Stallone. Not personally, like, not as a person and whatnot, because obviously I don't know enough details about his personality and whatnot, but as an actor, I think he's one of the worst actors I've ever seen. I give him Rocky 1. I definitely think Rocky 1's a good movie. It shouldn't have beat out Sidney Lumet's Network that year for Best Picture, but it was still, a decent film. And it was also, it was well written, so, like, if Stallone really did write a decent amount of that script, I gotta give him props for that. But at the same time, the only other movie of his that I like watching is Judge Dredd, just because of how bad it is. This movie, I walked in, I hadn't seen The Expendables 1. I hadn't seen any of it. But at the same time, you pretty much know what's going on. All these action heroes have to stop the bad guy. And of course, the bad guy is played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, which I always think that it's the guy you get when you can't afford Steven Seagal. But at the same time, like, Jean-Claude Van Damme has one good movie, in my opinion, and that's the movie In Hell, which is basically like this weird mesh of Ricky-O, the story of Ricky, and the Shawshank Redemption together, in a weird way. Certain elements, not two stories like that together, that would be a complete, total mindfuck. But it was a fun movie. It knew what it was. Unlike the first one, where I could tell, like, I haven't seen it, but from what I've heard of it, when I've read about it and whatnot, it was trying to take itself seriously to a point where this one, it's playing on the jokes and the cliches all the time. When Chuck Norris does show up, and he's only in the movie for like 10 minutes, if that. When Chuck Norris does show up, they make complete use of the Chuck Norris catchphrase jokes and whatnot. I think the one joke that they used is like, it's like, I heard you got bitten by a king cobra. It's like, yes, I did, and 5 days later it died. And so, like, it uses a whole bunch of different jokes like that, and it's Chuck Norris being Chuck Norris. He is an awful, awful actor. Stallone does a better job than him. Then you got, also, one thing, Jet Li, who is, like, promoted on everything involving this movie, he literally is only in the first 7 to 10 minutes of the movie. Only the first 7 to 10 minutes. He doesn't come back for the rest of the movie. Schwarzenegger's in there a couple times. But it's a movie where it's all ridiculous, and they try to have sensitive moments at certain points, but it just doesn't work. And but it's a fun ride. It really was. I got entertained by it. Uh, is it highbrow? No. Is it something that I would actually spend full price money on, like to get a DVD or something like that of it? No. Is it something that I would actually even watch on Netflix if I didn't have any time? Probably not. I probably would never have actually watched The Expendables 2 if I hadn't seen it at this show at Bengies. So, but it still was a fun movie to a degree. And then we get to the worst movie of the night, and that's The Odd Life of Timothy Green, the new Disney film. Um, the one thing I have to say about this movie is that this movie has a cast. The cast of characters are all cunts. They're such horrible cunts. For all these sorts of different reasons. One, there is absolutely no establishment. There's absolutely no stasis that they go from. There's no development. The best way I can describe this movie is a cast of cunts are in a movie. It's basically a no build up to a underwhelming conclusion. Each scene just drags. It's like they didn't really have that much of a story to go on, and it doesn't know what it wants to be. This movie has no idea what it wants to be. Is it going to be an enchanted mythical tale about this kid who pops out of the fucking ground? Is it going to be about this kid making relationships with another girl, even though they're both socially awkward for different reasons? Is it going to be kind of like the Bridge of Terabithia? Is it going to be something like that? Or is it about the parents and their ways of trying to struggle with raising a child? Or is it a movie about grief and loss and also trying to find ways inside yourselves to better yourselves? Like, it has all these tons of subplots pumped into this movie that everything is a complete mess. Now, is it well shot? Yes. Is it well acted? For what it's worth, it isn't bad, but at the same time, they're just assholes. They're all cunts. All these characters. The guy, Timothy Green, the main character, he's a little bastard. He's a snide little brat the entire time. And he just has this cocky grin on his face. Like he knows everything about the world, yet he doesn't know how to kick a soccer ball. I mean, I hate the confliction that they have there because it doesn't make for a likable character. The parents are completely oblivious and they're all over the place, and they whine about the most incessant shit. They whine incessantly about this, and especially with the wife. I can't remember the actors' names off the top of my head right now, but the wife's relationship to her sister and the husband's relationship to his father. Like, all these little subplots never go anywhere. They're all started. They're barely even started. You come in halfway. You come in, like, tons of movies can do this where you come in halfway through a story and they're trying to tell stuff through flashbacks. But I'm like, the way that it's all structured out, it's just, it doesn't tell us a concise story. It doesn't make me empathize or sympathize or anything with any of these characters. And all I just feel like every single time somebody talks, regardless of what it happens to be, they're all just cunts. They really are. And I've never seen a Disney movie that had such mean-spirited people in it that weren't animated. It's like these guys, all these characters, and then there's also this other subplot where the father works as a pencil pusher at this plant. He designs a new type of pencil made out of leaves, and his boss steals the idea, and everybody comes in front of the town, and they just they rally behind Timothy and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is another plot that goes nowhere. It's never mentioned after this big town meeting, which is maybe at the very beginning of the third act. well, actually, no, about halfway through the third act, it's never brought up again, ever. I mean, it's not even alluded to. Actually, you never see anyone involved with the pencil factory at all after that. And so, this movie is just a mess, because it doesn't know what it wants to be. It has no build-up. The conclusion is also mixed and muddled as hell. And... and they don't explain any of the mythology here, which I can understand where it's coming from these people's perspectives of this, but at the same time, like, nothing is ever explained about why exactly certain things led to certain things, especially, you know, why Timothy was there in the first place, what exactly, you know, what exactly happened. And I can understand leaving it at cliffhangers and gives you something to think about, but they don't even remotely try to answer this question. So, as a whole, all these movies that I watched at Bengies, and I want to try to start getting these reviews out more, because I want to try to go to Bengies a lot more now. But, you know, all these movies, ParaNorman was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. Bourne Legacy was okay. It was a decent action movie. Expendables was something that I would only watch once, and I watched it one time, and I laughed at it and had a good time. So it did its purpose. And The Odd Life of Timothy Green was just it was just a mean-spirited bad movie, and it wasn't bad for like any fault of the people in the movie, the actors in this movie. They were doing the characters that were directed and designed for them, and they, you know, I hope they put their own twist on them, but at the same time, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work as a movie. It doesn't even work as a real coherent story. So, that's all I got for you guys.